Well, hello there, friends. Welcome out to the green. I hope you have been enjoying this beautiful August, and I hope you've enjoyed the start of my Sacred Creature stories. You know, I love the scary stories, but I am also a fan of the legends of these creatures. When I was a little girl, I would play games with my cousins where we would pretend to be mythical creatures like unicorns and talking animals. And I would picture myself as one of these tall, regal unicorns or horses with a tall spiral horn. And other times I would be a mythical Pegasus with large, white, flapping wings, and I would fly all over the lands and all over snow-capped mountains. Good times. Now that I'm an adult, I don't see myself as that unicorn or Pegasus anymore. I know, shocking. In fact, there are going to be some personal changes for myself coming up. Turns out I will be moving within the next month. It's a bit out of the blue, but it looks to be a positive move. Since I will be spending time moving and packing and doing all those other things, I didn't want to start a Patreon page just yet. I was too concerned that I wouldn't be able to devote enough time to it and to keep the content up while I'm trying to get this move. So I'm going to be holding off for the time being. Moving us will take some time, as it's not just myself, but my 2 teens, my dog, 4 cats, and 2 rabbits. We are literally a full house. And since I want to make sure to be able to provide content that is enjoyable as well as, on time as possible, I decided I'm just going to hold off on that right now. But I should still be able to produce the podcast audio as well as the YouTube videos. But as for those other plans of subscriptions and things, I'm just going to hold off on that for just a bit. And for those fiber fans out there watching my YouTube channel, Cottage Weaver of Fiber and Tales, you will get to see my first time working with flax. It is a first time for me. I was gifted some of this flax fiber, and I decided for my first attempt I would be making some placemats. So on top of packing, getting ready to move, working full time, taking care of my horde of creatures, doing the podcast, and the YouTube channel, I'm also going to be weaving with flax. Yay! I don't know if you've noticed, but I am ADHD, so it'll be some good times for sure. Okay, back to the sacred creatures. There is one creature that I always felt was just, what's the word? It was a creature I thought I could never emulate, at least not at such a young age when I was a little girl. But I always loved them, and that is the dragon. It didn't matter the cultural difference of the dragon, they were always a creature I respected, admired, and was always in awe of. The energy of the dragon emanates such a profound strength, and I really welcome that in my life, especially right now. The strength of the dragon is so vast, as well as their knowledge. The older I got, the more I learned about the dragons. Dragons weren't just in English lore, but also in Asian and Incan lore. The Greeks have stories of their own encounters with the dragons, as well as the Babylonians, Norse, Chinese, and Germanic peoples. I mean, if you really take a look at the legends of the dragons across the globe, it's just so amazing. All of these cultures, some that had never met back then, all held a belief of some sort of dragon. So for this episode on Sacred Creatures, we are going to look at some of the lore. Now, the name dragon comes from the ancient Greek word drakonta. It means to watch. And it really doesn't matter the area of the world the dragon comes from. You always know a dragon when you see it. Usually extremely large, though some tales describe a smaller scale dragon. Speaking of scale, dragons almost always have scales, a long tail, a large mouth, large teeth that are somewhat canine-like, and most dragons have at least 4 feet. Some dragons, though, contain a sort of serpent-like appearance. They may not necessarily have feet, but they will slither, sort of like a snake. Much like the Norse dragon, which was called Ormr, or worm. This is how the Norse referred to the dragons at that time. Now, the most famous of the Norse dragon was Jormungandr, the offspring of the god Loki. Jormungandr lived in the great ocean that encircled Midgard, and he grew so big that he could grasp his own tail in his mouth. The Jormungandr is referred to as the world serpent, usually looked at as a villain, and is one of the oldest stories of Norse history, being told and retold through generation to generation. Jormungandr was cast into the sea by Thor when he was told of a prophecy that the Jormungandr and his siblings would challenge the power of the other gods. As Jormungandr grew in the sea, he got so big that he could encompass all of Midgard, or Earth, and again bite onto its tail. Norse prophecy states that when Jormungandr releases his tail, the beginning of the end will soon follow. In more modern times, Jormungandr is looked at as more of a representation of change. Sometimes necessary, sometimes hard, but usually for the better outcome. Sort of like lessons learned that might be tough, but they help you to grow and develop into something better. Now, Australia has stories of a creature, a serpent-like dragon called the rainbow serpent. You can still find drawings made on rocks that go back 6,000 years ago, depicting these creatures. The drawings are quite interesting, with a kangaroo head, a snake body decorated with water lilies, yams, and tendrils, ending in a pointed tail much like a crocodile. So you can see this imagery where these people from Australia were taking different parts of different animals, the kangaroo, the snake, the crocodile, and creating them into this rainbow serpent. The rainbow serpent in Australian lore is seen as the creator god of the Aboriginal people, representing creation, rain, storms, and floods. Not so much in the destructive sense, but in the regeneration and rebirth that the rains would bring. To see the generational influences the rainbow serpent has over the tribes of Australia shows just how important spirituality is to people of all walks of life. Rituals and ceremonies to this day still show us how revered the rainbow serpent is. As a guardian spirit, I think it is lovely that for the Aboriginals who die, whether it be from old age or caught up in a flood, their bones are reincarnated by the rainbow spirit into stones, so that they are never truly gone from their homes and lands. The rainbow serpent takes care of them, even in the afterlife, by keeping them a part of the land. Those who still worship the rainbow serpent do so by providing offerings for fertility and abundance. Now, if we travel over to the island of New Zealand, the Maori tribes have a sacred creature called the Taniwha. Each tribe has one, and it is looked at as the tribe's protector. The Taniwha are guardians of the land, sea, and sky, and are seen as the ancestral beings associated with bodies of water like rivers, lakes, and oceans. These creatures are a part of the natural world that resemble serpents like dragons, but they can also shapeshift into different forms. In its natural form, though, the Taniwha also have feathers and scales, and very strong tails. Yes, I said it in plural form, tails. Now they can vary in size, but they can also shapeshift, like I said, and for this representation, it makes sense. But their form is really based on where they reside. So if in a large body of water like an ocean, a taniwha will appear in the form of like a shark or even a whale. But in rivers and lakes, those bodies of waters that are smaller, the taniwha will appear in forms of geckos and other small lizards. In either form, these sacred creatures are intelligent, cunning, and they are described as being both positive and negative in their interactions. But I suppose it depends on the taniwha's reasoning and their influence, because the taniwha are there to create balance and to keep balance in the universe. So it may seem like a negative to one person, but a positive to somebody else. Like I said, each tribe has their own particular taniwha. In fact, each human can also have a taniwha of their own who guards and guides their family. They will warn the family of potential dangers and also punish those who show disrespect or harm to the land and the taniwha's waters. These subgroups of the taniwha are broken down into the taniwha moana, which are sea monsters, quote unquote, the taniwha wenau, or the land guardians, the taniwha awa, river spirits, and the taniwha gahiri, the forest dwellers. Now, let me just interject, I might have mispronounced some of those. If I did, I do apologize. Devotees of the taniwha will hold rituals and ceremonies where they provide and they pray with offerings to the taniwha. They are truly a creature that the people of New Zealand should treasure, which I'm sure they do. Now, my Celtic ancestors would have believed in a dragon form as well. Odd, isn't it? So many cultures who have never met from varying centuries have a dragon history of one form or another. We use the term dragon, but maybe there is a better one. I mean, not only did the Celts and the Norse use the term worm to describe what we now call dragons. It's something to think about for sure. But back to the dragon history of the Celtics. Dragons were also seen as sacred creatures of wisdom and power, with a close relationship to the land. In fact, where the dragon was believed to live, walk, or pass by was believed to be a powerful place. These creatures were seen as protectors of the earth. Now, this historical lore is not Hollywood inspired, so forget the fire-breathing monster, forget the glamorous and the glitzy, teeth-snatching and princess-stealing stories. The true history of the dragon is of strength with transformation and a grace with the passing of the natural life. The description of the dragon in Celtic lore can either have wings and 4 legs, but history shows that they were more associated with water, and some were more like serpents, with no legs at all, but still found near bodies of water like lakes, rivers, seas, and oceans. These dragons were actually on the same level of other gods and were seen as protectors. The red dragon of the British Isle is one, if not most known, of the Celtic dragons. The red dragon was also called the Arag Goth, is on the Welsh flag as the official emblem and represented the Welsh pagan god Dewi. As with many a pagan deity, the Christians Christianized this pagan deity Dewi into Saint David. Sadly, the god Dewi and his history is pretty much wiped from existence. The history is just so old we don't have anything to really go by, but from what I have read, research is still being attempted. With that being said, the red dragon story continues in Arthurian legends. That is the time of King Arthur, who, I might add, is sometimes known as Arthur Pendragon. In Welsh, the words pen and drag usually mean chief dragon. But let's keep in mind, even though we don't know the true history of the god Dewey, we do know before the English adopted the dragon as their emblem, the dragon was seen as an elemental. It was the representation of life, death, and the afterlife, and it had a very close relationship to the earth and its people. Now, there is no way I can discuss dragons without visiting the history of China. Chinese dragons and the English dragons have similarities and vast differences. And most people can see these differences. The Chinese dragons are much more serpent-like. They are long, slender, at times sometimes lizard-like, with talons and usually whiskers. The dragon in Chinese culture deserves respect and reverence. One of the oldest discoveries of a dragon statue actually dates back to the 5th millennium BC. That's a long time ago. It is interesting to note that the dragon, usually considered mythical, holds a place in the Chinese zodiac along with animals like the dog, the ox, the tiger, and the rat. Why would something that is deemed quote-unquote not real or made up be categorized along with creatures that are real? Not just that, but we give this supposed imaginary creature symbolism of wisdom, strength, wealth, and prosperity. It makes me wonder if maybe there was something dragon-esque, dragon-like, that just is no longer existing now. Just like the English, the Chinese also use the image of the dragon to show their stance in regards to power and authority, with many nobles using the dragon as their emblem. And many consider themselves descendants of the dragon. The actual origin of the dragon's influence is a bit foggy, with some believing the Emperor Huang Di, who sat on the dragon throne. Legend says when he died, he ascended to heaven as a dragon, while others believed it was Emperor Yan Di, who was a descendant of a very powerful dragon, which made him more powerful than other leaders of his time. And it is this Emperor Yan Di who joined forces with Emperor Huang Di. They became allies, and when the two of them got together, they unified China. They vanquished their enemies and forged the beginning of the Chinese civilization. Just like the serpentine dragons of Australia and New Zealand, the Chinese dragons are associated with waters like lakes and rivers. There were different types of dragons that are classified by colors and also by their tasks. The Chinese believed that different colored dragons should only be worn by royalty. So by that I mean one color of dragon could only be worn by the royal families. And the commoners, if they were caught wearing this particular colored dragon, would suffer pretty bad punishment that could even include death. But let's take a look at some of these colored dragons. A black dragon symbolized the north and can bring about storms and other bad omens and negativity. A blue dragon represented the east and was a sign of spring, new beginnings, and health. A green dragon would also symbolize health, but also of nature, as well as healing and peace. A red dragon symbolized the west and was a bringer of summer and good fortune and happiness. Now, the white dragon did represent the south and was seen as a harbinger of death and disease, but also of purity. So the white dragon had sort of a duality going on. It's an interesting interpretation. But for those who view death as not just an end, but also as a form of transformation, you can see that in this way, death is not a bad thing. Death was a way to shed the human badness and allowed the spirit of the human to become pure. The yellow dragon is a representation of power. The yellow dragon is seclusive and are revered as they carry your wishes to the gods. These are the dragons of the emperors. They were not dragons for the common folk. The yellow dragons also represented wealth and wisdom. Classifying the Chinese dragon by color was not only the way to describe the Chinese dragon. There is a depth to their spiritual variety. The spiritual dragon, which is blue in color and called Shenlong, was a quote-unquote spirit dragon. The Shenlong controlled the rains, the winds, and it worked to ensure that humans can benefit from these elements. Now there are other dragons such as the Tianlong, the heaven dragon, and the Fukanglong, the dragon of hidden treasures who guards the precious metals and other treasures. Xiaolong is a horned dragon who lives in the sea and controls floods. As you can see, the Chinese history of the dragon is long and extensive and thorough, and I think it really shows the love and devotion the people of China had for this element. Now the Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese also had their dragons. The Ryu is a scaly, slender, serpent-like dragon of the Japanese history, and interestingly, these ones had antlers on top of its head. These dragons were devout energies to the people of Japan, save for the most famous, who sadly was not so nice. While, like I said, the other dragons were benevolent and friendly to the people of Japan, this particular dragon, called Yamatano Orochi, had 8 heads and was an evil dragon. He also had 8 tails and 8 toes on each foot. Now, the story of Yamatano Orochi is that one head by one head ate one princess until there was one dragon head left, looking for its last princess to eat. Now, each of the princesses that had been devoured had been a sister, and the last sister was heard crying as she knew she was going to be the next to go. Her cries, however, attracted the attention of a storm god, Susanoo, who came to her aid. Susanoo transformed the princess into a lovely comb and placed her in his hair. Then he waited for the 8-headed dragon, hungry for its last princess value meal. The god Susanoo was a smart one, as are most gods, and he waited for the dragon next to a huge vat of sake. Yamatano Orochi saw the sake, and each head began to drink its full, till each head was just as drunk as the next. Susanoo then unsheathed his sword and cut each head of the dragon clean off, saving the princess from her happy meal fate. Koreans refer to their dragons as Yong, and there are actually 3 types. The Yong is the most powerful, protecting the skies, while the Yo is a hornless variety, and these ones live in the oceans. The Kayo, actually, these guys live in the mountains. Now there is a theory, which I think is a little interesting, that the claws of the dragons that originated in Korea traveled east to China. While they traveled, they developed an extra claw. And this explains why the Chinese dragons have 5 claws. But when the dragons then began to travel north, they ended up losing 2 claws. So when the dragons then reached Japan, they only had 3. dragons. They are more than just the fire-breathing creature of the Game of Thrones. They are eternal and elemental, a part of the earth and the part of Earth's people. Each culture views them in one way or another as protectors, and worshipping them aided them in the success of their lives. These creatures controlled the seas and the skies, and the temperament of these two elements, air and water, literally played a part in the livelihood of the people of China and Japan, and of the other Asian islands to the east. If the oceans were raging, then fishing was more dangerous. If the winds did not blow or blew too forceful, then the crops could be damaged or not grow. It makes sense to me that the importance of such elements would have embodied such a magnificent, powerful image like the dragon. So I hope this tale of the sacred dragon was a good one for you. It definitely was for me. It brought to light the importance and the distinct differences of interpretation people had many years ago of the dragon. If you are watching my YouTube channel, you will see I have not finished my placemats and probably won't for a while, as I have some house hunting and plans for packing to do, so weaving will not be at the forefront. But I will still be working on it and on more sacred creature tales. With that being said, I hope you get the chance to get out to the green soon, take time to ground yourself and take a breath. And while you're out there, give some thanks to the dragon spirits of wind and rain.